In this video, we're going to go through the Solid Edge interface and compare it to some extent against the Solidworks interface. We'll talk a lot about customizing the Solid Edge interface. First of all, Solid Edge uses the Microsoft device known as the ribbon. And this differs from the SolidWorks Command Manager in a couple of ways. While SolidWorks Command Manager has the tabs hanging down from the bottom, the Solid Edge ribbon essentially has these tabs on the top. They look like menus, but they aren't. Solid Edge doesn't really have any menus anymore. All they have is the ribbon, which works essentially the same as SolidWorks Command Manager. Solid Edge doesn't have a specific command to customize the ribbon, but the way they do it is by right-click on the ribbon anywhere, and you can customize various parts of the interface. So you can add this selected tool to the quick access toolbar, which is at the top. You can add the line that predicts commands for you, which, by the way, I have found to not work very well. SolidWorks also has this, but I haven't tried it in SolidWorks because it hasn't worked very well for me in Solid Edge. Customize the quick access toolbar, so that allows you to add and remove items or possibly reorder items on the quick access bar, which I think this is a very useful part of the interface. All of the things that you would normally use menus for, you can access through this toolbar. Show quick access toolbar below the ribbon. So if you want to move it from up here to down here, you could do that. You can customize the ribbon, and this is the big one here. Minimize the ribbon, so that's just like F9 in SolidWorks. You can use the interface in the configuration just by clicking on the various headers or tabs, or however you want to call these. And to get this back permanently, you can right-click on it and turn off Minimize the ribbon. On here we have the themes. You can save out several different themes. I noticed that SolidWorks also had something like this, but it's a new addition. Solid Edge has had this for many releases now. If you get the interface in a configuration that you like and you want to use and maybe move to another computer, you can use the themes option. To get back to the important part here, we're going to look at customize the ribbon in more detail. You can customize the interface for several environments. And once you get it configured, you use the Save or Save As button to create a new theme or edit an old one. You can add whatever tools you want by selecting them from the list and then selecting a place to put it and using Add or Remove to do that. You can add a new tab to the top of the ribbon or a new group within a tab. The separator is like one of these dividers. In addition to editing the ribbon, you can also use the keyboard tab to create keyboard shortcuts. In Solid Edge, you have to have at least one modifier, and you can't have more than one. So that means in Solid Edge, you have to have hotkeys like Shift-A or Control-S. You can't have Alt-Control-A. And you can't use just a single letter like G. Again, in Solid Edge, I like to set up a bunch of hotkeys for things that I use frequently. This helps you keep the screen from getting cluttered with tools. We talked a little bit about customizing the quick access toolbar. You do this in the same way that you customize the ribbon. If we go back to the ribbon, there's something that I should mention here. If you want to customize individual buttons, you can turn them on or off using the check mark or right-click and designate it as a large button or turn off the text. If you want to turn off the text within a section of a tab, you can right-click on the header for that and edit the button options for the size of the icon and the text. If you want to make an edit for the entire tab, you can right-click on the name and again select the button options, and this will make these edits for the entire tab. From this customize area, you can also customize the radial menus, which is the equivalent of SolidWorks gestures. Here you can get 2 rings, and this is not meant so much as a gestures interface as it is just an additional menu activated by the right mouse button. The Layout tab under Customize offers some settings for the interface. This is where you can control things like tooltips and the video clips within the tooltips. This is also where you can control your start environment, synchronous or ordered, and control if the panes are dockable. I want this one to be turned on for sure, and I want to see the reference plane names as well. Let's get some geometry on the screen so we can see a little bit more about how this interface will work. One of the first things we want to talk about is the right mouse button menu, which works very similar to Solidworks, such that you have the top context bar with your more commonly used tools. You can also right-click on items in the Pathfinder. Left-clicking on an item in the Pathfinder will also just give you the context bar, and the same thing on the graphics window. Also, like Solidworks, we have the delayed right mouse button menu, so that if you hover over an item in the graphics window for a set amount of time, you get an icon that shows you can right-click and get an alternate quick pick menu. So if you pierced the part with an arrow at this point, what entities would it go through? It would go through first the feature and also the sketch, more specifically the region bounded by the sketch, and the design body itself. I would argue that it also pierces this cylindrical face and then the flat face on the back, and those should also be listed. But Quick Pick helps you select things that you can't select directly. The radial menus are accessed by holding down the right mouse button and moving the cursor slightly. This works a little bit different from Solidworks. To access the menu, you have to hold down the right mouse button while you navigate around to pick whatever it is that you want to pick. So this works slightly different than the Solidworks interface. And then to actually select an item, you would just release the right mouse button over that icon, and it will pull up the command. Another one of the nice tools in the Solid Edge interface is the Quick View cube down in the lower right-hand corner. And from here, you can select views or isometric views quickly and easily. The items that you can select are a face, an edge, a corner, or one of the various arrows. The down arrow pulls out several of the zoom states that you might want to use, and also gives you access to settings for the Quick View cube. If you're square onto a face, you can use these arrows on the side to rotate 90 degrees. I think this is a very handy interface. I use it frequently, and it's a great tool. Since we're talking about customizing the interface, let's talk about moving some of these things around. This is called the command bar. In old versions of Solid Edge, this would be just a horizontal bar with no text, just a bunch of icons across the top. It was great if you were an old-time user and you knew what all of the icons meant, but if you're a new user, it got kind of confusing. So Solid Edge has given us the option of using what they call the vertical command bar. And the vertical command bar has more text in it, and it's set up much more like the Solidworks property manager. You step down through these steps one by one. If something's grayed out, it means that there's some sort of prerequisite that's not satisfied, or you don't have the right things selected, or something like this. You can take the command bar and dock it. It'll snap into a corner. You can snap it to the top, snap it to the bottom. It will also move off the screen. So if you have multiple monitors or a setup where you can move this interface area out of the graphics window, that might be a good thing. The Pathfinder can also be moved around, and if you drop it on one of these markers on the screen, it'll go to a certain area. And the final area of interface customization that we want to talk about is under the Options dialog. There's several things in here that you can use to help you customize the interface, but the area I want to talk about most is helpers. Here you can establish what it is that you see when you first start Solid Edge. Again, you can establish what environment your new parts come up with. You can select an application scheme, control tooltips, control the size of the steering wheel, Orient Express, and the view cube. This would be particularly important if you have a very high resolution monitor. You may want to jack up the sizes of these interface elements so they're easier to see and to work with. Use a horizontal user interface for the display of recent documents. This will give you a horizontal list instead of a vertical list. You can turn on the predict commands functionality and control the visibility of tooltips. Also, if you wanted to use the radial menus more as the gesture type interface that Solidworks uses, you can enable that right here. And the context toolbars that are part of the right and left mouse button menus are controlled in the helpers page as well. One of the things I find very interesting about Solid Edge is the ability to write a formula for new file names. And finally, you can establish your language to be used in the interface. Hope you found this run through of the Solid Edge interface and customizations useful. If you're switching over to Solid Edge from SolidWorks, there's definitely a period of getting used to the new way of doing things. Remember that Solid Edge generally only has one way of doing things. It doesn't allow multiple ways of doing the same things like SolidWorks does. In some ways, that's a good thing because it standardizes procedure, makes it easier to teach, easier to learn. But obviously, if you're a chaotic user, you might benefit from having multiple ways of doing things. In any case, good luck, and thanks for watching.